Hey everybody out there, this is Seto, and today for you guys, we're going to talk about a topic that a lot of people, I guess you could say, in the Yu-Gi-Oh community have talked about this topic as of recently, and it's been a topic that people have been talking about for a long time in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, that is. And people make it seem to be that it's all black and white. It's either you do this and that will make this work, there's no gray area. I feel like it's not a simple, do this and this will work, pretty much is what I'm trying to say about power creep in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, or just in general, instead of just talking about power creep, how to fix the game of Yu-Gi-Oh to make it better for the players as a whole, to make it better for everybody as best as possible. Granted, there are going to be people out there that are going to say, you know what, I do not like these changes, I'm quitting. You're going to get that. You're going to get that with a lot of people out there in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! No matter what you do, Konami, no matter what the player, Konami does. But if you make a majority, you make 95 out of 5% people happy, you're doing your job good, I feel like. I mean, you can't make everybody happy is where I'm saying at the end of the day. Some people may disagree with me in this video, and that's perfectly fine. I can't make everybody happy. I can't. And Konami in the same term cannot do the same thing. They're not God, they're not, Nirvana, they're human beings that run a company in a card game that we all love and enjoy at the end of the day. But some people have hypothesized that some things we could do to fix the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is set rotations. Personally, if set rotations were to be done, I personally probably would quit the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's one of the reasons why I never played really that much Magic the Gathering a lot, because I just didn't like set rotations. It was just having to invest in cards that were going to be creeped, it's just a pain in the butt. But I get where that could be a good idea. But the problem is, people say, well, if we do set rotations, then we don't need to have a ban list. Look at Magic the Gathering. They still need a ban list, because even though they do set rotations, they still need a ban list to stop the powerful cards out. And it just becomes, Magic just becomes this kebab thing where I don't know what it is anymore, since when I played back when I was very young. Pokemon, on the other hand, yeah, it does set rotations, but it's just, they did that for a couple times just to freaking get things worked out properly and properly build the game, which was cool and everything, but they still do power creep to some extent. The thing is, I think that there's no really good way to fix power creep in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! It's something, no matter what you do in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be there, no matter what. Some people have suggested as of lately that what we do is we just restart. We hit the restart button, self-destruct button, and then we restart the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! From the beginning. Pretty much we go back to a certain set and we just do set rotations there. We just restart, we go back 7 years, cut everything out like it never happened. That is very implausible. I don't think that would ever happen in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! That's a waste. That's just such a big thing to do. I could not see Konami ever doing that, and I don't think it's a good solution. Some people have also suggested that what we do is we just make everything power creep, so everything's equal. Everything, off the ban list comes off. Everything's full power. It's the wild, wild west out there where everybody's slinging their guns and shooting with, X-Sabers with, Rescue Cat, and there's Gateway with 3, Gateway with 3 Gateway with 6 AM, stuff like that. Like, make it the wild, wild west out there where everybody's equal. Okay, that's a cool idea. I like that idea, and I think it's more plausible and more doable than just hitting the restart button on the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And granted, you may have other ideas, and there may be something that just slipped in my mind, but those are the two main ideas I've heard a lot throughout the course of the game's history. But from playing this game for how long I've played it for, what has it been now? Since pretty much day one, I would say, so probably 13 years, 14 years, since 2003, 2002. I've been playing this game for a long time, and I've talked with many different people and had many heated discussions, just good discussions in general about this topic. And at the core of playing, coming from a player, and me personally, who did play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! For a good chunk of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s history, be it the early days, back, I'm talking back in the day, I'm grandfather Yugi, to being at doing the Six Samurai, Rescue Rabbit era, Wind Up era. I stopped playing competitively because I had more pressing issues. I had to grow up. But yes, I've been in those shoes before. I know how those competitive players think. I know that mindset. Granted, the decks may have changed, the formats may have changed, but at the core, a competitive player is still a competitive player and has certain tendencies. So I understand those tendencies very well, and I understand where they're coming from. They want to play the best deck because it gives them the best option to win. At the end of the day, that's why they do that. They may enjoy that deck, they may like the playing style. It depends, but that's at the core one of the reasons why they play those decks. Casual players play the deck because it's fun and cool. They like that deck, that's why they play it. And they may play a little bit wonky, a little bit crazy here and there because they may be a budget player as well, but they play that deck because they get enjoyment out of it. A casual competitive player I've always looked at, and we're not here to nitpick, you know, the different types of players out there, but I feel those are the three main groups. Casual competitive players are those players that can play competitive, they have a competitive mindset, you know, they want to win. Me personally, I played sports for, you know, a good chunk of my life growing up. I did track and did American football, you know, track and field and American football for 8 years plus. I understand that competitive drive. I understand you just want to, you know, I want to win. You get that endorphins going off in your body. You're like, oh, that victory, you know, throwing your arms up in the air and say, I won, I won, I won, I'm the king of the world type of feeling from Titanic. I get that feeling. I understand that feeling. I've had that feeling. So that's what I'm trying to say here. I understand what people are trying to say here. But how can we make all these people happy? We can't make everything happy. We can't make everybody happy fully. We can try our best to make as many people as happy as possible, but not everybody's going to be happy with their situations. So what do we do? What are some things we can do in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh? Like I've just stated, I've been in this game for a long time and I understand all the different aspects. Right now I consider myself a casual competitive player or competitive casual player, whatever you want to call it. Because I love playing competitively, but I also love playing decks that I just enjoy for fun. You know, can I pick up a meta deck and probably play it? Yeah, but do I really want to invest the money in it? No. I'd rather spend that money on something else. Going out to dinner with my girlfriend, going on trips, stuff of that nature. So I play the decks I want to play, and that's all. Sometimes those decks are competitive decks. So, you know, Burning Abyss is a good example. I've been wanting to play that deck since day one I saw the deck. So yes, that's what I'm trying to say here, guys. I understand all these. I've been in all these categories before throughout my Yu-Gi-Oh career, so I do understand them. But how do we make as much people as happy as possible? How do we address power creep? How do we address all these different things? Everybody's had their own opinion, and that's great. Me personally, I felt like, from playing this game for so long, that up until the late GX era, everything, for the most part, however, was pretty much, you know, okay, a little bit of variation. The game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Hadn't changed drastically. Granted, we had, you know, your Chaos, your Scapegoat format, things like that, but the decks weren't like, how can I say this properly? It wasn't just this tier 1 deck. It was good deck, good deck, good deck, good deck, good deck, good deck, great deck, great deck, good deck, great deck. It was something like that. It was all these decks could compete with one another to some degree. Granted, you know, some decks were better than others outright. Some, you know, plain decks were fun outright. And people want to sometimes revisit those days by playing older decks, which is fine. But I feel that for the most part, archetypes really help the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Being able to be balanced to some degree. And I'm not going to, I know people are going to disagree with me about that, but it made, instead of hearing generic cards that hurt other decks, you just hit the archetype and that would deal with the problem there, and those other decks could still thrive to some degree. But that's beside this point, that's not part of this video here. So what would I suggest? Well, what would I say? So like I was saying, it looked like up into the GX era that everything was pretty much balanced. Granted, Phantom of Darkness changed and flipped things on top of their heads, and Cyber Dragon, you know, made special summoning a joke, along with BLS making special summoning a joke. You know, things of that nature. Contact Fusion was a thing, granted. So yeah, there was little things in here, but the game wasn't, I felt like, I can't describe it exactly. But then when Synchros came out and these new mechanics came out, it completely changed the landscape of Yu-Gi-Oh! Synchros. And then because they want to make something else to make Yu-Gi-Oh! More popular, they made XYZs. And after XYZs, they made Pendulums to make everything more broken. And granted, throughout the course of Yu-Gi-Oh! History, and especially after the Duelist Alliance era, and before the Duelist Alliance era to some degree, you saw Konami doing something that they hadn't really done a lot of before, in the case You know, in the last 2 to 3 years, Konami's been doing this a lot more and been doing it a lot better, I feel like. They've been going back and making older archetypes more relevant. Not broken, not busted, but good playable decks that you can actually play and enjoy. Make them work good. That's the point. That's something I want to mention here. Make them work good. Good decks, not broken, good decks. So you also see them also doing something else to making old mechanics more relevant in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Shadalls, they updated fusion. Heck, they made Fright Furs, an archetype that uses polymerization, a card that's been around since what, pretty much day one, and made that relevant in a Fright Fur deck. Who does that? That's amazing. That's amazing that that card is actually still relevant in a deck that's pretty damn good. They also updated Rituals. They made Rituals a meta deck. After how many years, really? Rituals were never a tier 1 deck. You could argue, you know, this deck was very good, you know, for a couple of months or so, but it wasn't good for a long period of time like they did with Necros. They made XYZs good. They made Pendulums updated. They made Fusions updated. And they even made some pretty decent Synchros and Yang Zings and whatnot. They made good Synchro decks. Okay, so what do I say here now? Pendulums, for the most part, help out all these other mechanics at the end of the day. Okay? Konami, I feel like, wants to, at the end of the Pendulum era, or, you know, not the era necessarily, but the end of the day, when they want to go into another series or whatnot, they're going to want to maybe make a new mechanic. I would say to Konami, maybe not to do that. Why? How much more broken are we going to get after Pendulums? I mean, we've gone through using 2 monsters to make a big strong monster, 2 monsters that are generic to make a strong monster, splurging my hand on the bloody field, and having reoccurring resources coming out from the extra deck. I mean, how much more are we going to go here before it gets out of hand? So what should we do? I would suggest to Konami, don't make another mechanic. People may say, well, then Yu-Gi-Oh! Won't be popular, it won't be good, it won't be great, it won't be amazing. Remember what I said earlier, when I stated that I've been in all these different boats of casual, competitive, and whatnot players out there. You know, competitive and semi-competitive and casual, all that stuff. From my travels and talking to players throughout the course of my Yu-Gi-Oh! History on the East Coast over here, could be different in Europe, could be different in the Midwest, the West Coast, in Japan even. Most players out there are competitively driven players out there that like playing decks that they enjoy. They may have that meta deck because that's what gives them the best chance to win at a major tournament, or the locals, or whatever. But at the end of the day, they would rather play their freaking fun deck, or play a deck they really enjoy. I'm not joking. I've seen so many competitive players out there come through saying, I'm going to play meta, I'm going to be the best competitive player, I'm going to top these events. And you know what happens after about a year or two? They're no longer really a super competitive player, mind-driven. Competitive players can only be competitive players for so long. Your wallet is only going to hold up for so long, paying those prices for being a competitive player. A casual player, on the other hand, can be more balanced in what he does. He can manage his resources better, I find. And at the same time, getting more enjoyment out of the game, for that matter. Or a semi-competitive casual player can get enjoyment out of the game and still be fun, you know, do good. So what would I suggest to Konami? I would suggest at the end of the Golden Rainbow here, that pretty much don't make another mechanic. Make an era or a thing in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you don't build a new mechanic. Instead, you go back and revisit everything that you've done in the past. For all those players that have been in the game for so long and who have stuck by you, make older decks better. Make a Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime or Yu-Gi-Oh! Era based off, you know, older decks coming back, or base it off the dual terminal, for crying out sake. Or, which you don't have, you can still make a new mechanic, but make older decks have more support. And I'm not just talking about your Dark Magician, you blew up your Buster Blader, things of that nature. Great, Konami. I am grateful to the end of time that you've done this to these decks. But make older decks, give them some cards here and there. Use your TCG imports instead of making new archetypes, like Cosmos and whatnot. Use those to make older decks more relevant. You don't need to make them broken. You don't need to make them great. Make them good. Make them playable. Make them so I can take that deck as a semi-competitive player, which most players are out there, I find. Use that deck, check that deck out, work that deck, and have fun playing against other decks. Don't build a new mechanic. Just go revisit, like for 2 to 3 years, old decks. Catch them up to the speed. Work on level monsters. A mechanic you left for dead 10 years ago, which is a good mechanic, but you never revisited it. You never went back and redid it. Go back, revisit that. Go back, revisit, you don't have to revisit every single old archetype, but revisit the ones that people have been asking you to revisit for a long time, and just make them good. They don't have to be, Blue Eyes White Dragon good. They don't have to have a set dedicated to them. Make them volcanic good. Make them, fight for good. Make them, for Pete's sake, just a good deck like Gaga, which people take for granted, or Heraldic Beast, or just a good, solid deck that works. That's all you need to do. Do that while you're going into this a new era, Konami. You don't need to break a more book. You don't need to make another mechanic. We got 3 mechanics. You've done a lot with those mechanics over the years. Excuse me, 4. You got Fusion, you got Synchro, you got XYZ, and you got Pendulum. You got 4 mechanics. 4 mechanics is enough to play so many different decks, so many different playing styles. You can do a dual terminal lore. You can make the next, just revisit. Just make it, for 2 to 3 years, Konami, don't build a new archetype. Don't build, not a new archetype, excuse me. You can build new archetypes. You can make those archetypes be good so they can be played by competitive players. I don't mind. I'm saying if you don't make a new mechanic and you just work with the ones that you have now, exploit those for a couple of years, and also at the same time bring older decks up to speed. Don't need to make them broken. Don't need to make them, amazing. Yes, I would love Blue Eyes to be meta, but I don't need that. I just need that deck to be freaking played and be a good, solid deck that I can play with this against my friend over here who's got another good, solid deck. And you know what? I want to have that deck be able to take it to locals, regionals, and have a good showing. That's all. I don't need to face, have broken stuff all the time. There will always be power creep in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! You can't deny it will go away. In every game out there, be it any type of thing out there, from football, even though they have a salary cap, to everything else out there, there is power creep in the game. There's always going to be something that's better than what was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and that's fine. But you need to work on the things you already have instead of proceeding forward with something brand new. Spend some time on what you're doing. This is literally how many uses? Isn't this like in the TCG? I think it's like the Pokemon's just having their 20th anniversary right now and whatnot, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, having its 15th year anniversary, something like that, 18th, something like that. I forget the original date when Yu-Gi-Oh! Started in Japan. But don't make a new mechanic. Revisit the old stuff to make your older players happy, to show newer players that there's older things out there that are cool and still fun to play. Okay? Do that. You will make the player base so much happy, and I bet you'll make just about every player out there happy. While you produce new archetypes that can be good, they don't need, they can be broken even to some extent, but at the same time, you are showing us that you want to support your fans that have been here for a long time, and at the same time, you show newer players that, hey, fusion summoning, synchro summoning. One of the reasons why I love Archer V, as in this video, in the show, is because they don't just focus like every other mechanic out, like doing the, synchro area. Yeah, they showed some fusion, but it was mostly synchros. Doing the Exceeds era, they mostly just showed Exceeds. Doing the Arc V era, Arc 5, they've been showing fusion, synchro, Exceed summoning, everything, pendulum summoning, everything. And that is what I want to see for the rest of the game, Yu-Gi-Oh's history. Not another mechanic, just working on what you got, and maybe down the road in 3, 4 years, 5 years, you can build a new mechanic. That's fine. Work on something, but don't make it too busted. Make it good. You don't need to make it broken, and people will still buy it. I promise you that. That's just my thoughts, guys. It can be broken, it can be good, but it doesn't need to be broken. Everybody may say, oh, it's a good card, but it's broken. No, just make it good. So till next time, guys, take care, have fun dueling, good luck dueling, and tell me what you think down below. I'll see you next time.